The Men Who Stare at Goats is a 2009 comedy with a stellar cast that is widely hated. This retrospective will not just cover the movie as I usually do. My goal here is to sell you on giving this movie another chance. First off, The Men Who Stare at Goats is supposed to be absurd. It's a satire of government idiocy, a subject ripe for some madcap comedy. Directed by the talented Grant Heslov, who has had a hand in a ton of great projects like Good Night and Good Luck, The American, The Ides of March, Money Monster, Catch-22, and most notably, Argo. The stellar cast that I mentioned just a bit ago features George Clooney, Ewan McGregor, Jeff Bridges, Stephen Lang, Robert Patrick, Stephen Root, Nick Offerman, and Kevin Spacey years before we learned what a scumbag he really is. Men Who Stare at Goats is a comedy drama that has an amazing disclaimer right before the story gets going that reads, "More of this is true than you would believe." The DVD release even has a documentary attached to it that reinforces this point. The movie explores the highly secret and strange, but largely true, efforts of the US military to experiment with paranormal abilities. After the brilliant disclaimer, we meet a rundown journalist in Bob Wilton, played by Ewan McGregor. Bob's career is in the gutter and his wife had just left him. Feeling like he's at an all-time low, Bob travels to Kuwait, looking for a story and sense of purpose in the Iraq War. The movie really gets going when Wilton meets Lynn Cassidy, played by George Clooney. I want to remind everyone of that awesome disclaimer at the top of the movie. Cassidy claims to be a psychic soldier in a secret segment of the military called the New Earth Army. Now we fall back into a story within the story, and this is a trope I'm getting pretty tired of, but that's a tangent that we can explore at another time. Cassidy tells Wilton all about the founding of the New Earth Army. A man called Bill Django, played by the always stellar Jeff Bridges, is a hippie from the Vietnam era, but he's also a Vietnam vet. The two usually don't go hand in hand. He started living as a guru after his time in the war. The military reached back out to Django and tasked him with creating a group of warrior monks who would harness the power of their minds for non-violent conflict resolution. This open-ended statement ended up meaning a lot of things. Remote viewing, which is spying on enemies through the ether while the spy's body remains safely wherever it is, was a major thing, and the word Jedi is thrown around quite a bit to my delight. The reason for the title of the movie is part of Cassidy's story as well. The men would literally sit and stare at tethered goats for crazy long periods of time, trying to kill the animals with their minds. Due to circumstances I'm pretty sure are purely coincidental, the New Earth Army feel like they've had some success in this area. This unfounded sense of success and importance is actually a huge part of Cassidy's character and his comedy. He claims his powers can cloud people's minds and that he can use his mental powers to break up clouds. Listing them back to back like this, because they're not listed that way in the movie, brings even more absurdity to it. Why is Cassidy's fixation so much on clouds and clouding? Maybe the intangible structure of clouds was seen as a great metaphor for his powers. He manages to accomplish things you wouldn't think this weirdo could do because of his strong belief in himself. And I'm not talking about anything supernatural. The movie doesn't do anything out-and-out supernatural. It is told to be real enough. Wilton and Cassidy become traveling companions across Iraq together. Wilton sees a journalistic piece in Cassidy, and he's also genuinely interested in the man's crazy story. The craziness of that story is the craziness of the movie, and it's definitely a big draw for audiences. The line between reality and absurdity is razor thin, and that's where a lot of the zany comedy comes from. What sells this ridiculous story and script, and I mean no part of that is a negative to the movie, it's purely an objective assessment, are the performances. George Clooney is ever the superstar. He gives no signs of thinking the role is beneath him. This is not the type of role you typically think of when you hear the name George Clooney, but he really can nail a comedic performance. His dedication to taking the most ridiculous aspects of the script and his characters seriously make this movie work. Jeff Bridges' most famous role, at least for my generation, is probably the dude in The Big Lebowski. There's a lot of the dude in Bill Django. It wouldn't even be that much of a rewrite to say that the dude was Bill Django before we catch up to him in Lebowski. The caliber of actor he is, much like Clooney's role, sells a silly script with a great performance. Whew, here we go. Kevin Spacey. At this point, it's hard to say positive things about Kevin Spacey, so let's try to put ourselves in the 2009 headspace and separate the art from the artist. Spacey plays Larry Hooper, Hooper is basically the villain of the movie. Even though each level of the story takes place in a different all-out war, the more intimate story has Hooper, a New Earth soldier gone wrong, as the foil to Clooney's Cassidy. What makes the villain, and I keep using that word even though it's a little bit strong for what his role really is, what makes his role as the villain all the better is that the disagreements between him and Cassidy are so petty in the grand scheme of things. Ewan McGregor rounds out the main cast. Now, I love Ewan McGregor in pretty much everything he's in, and it's not just because he's Obi-Wan Kenobi. He serves as the audience's way into the crazy world, hence the double-level narration. McGregor also gets to stretch his comedic legs, but as something of a counter to the rest of the cast. He's not part of the New Earth Army, nor does he have any unrealistically high views of his abilities. He reacts to the insanity around him as many of us would, with maybe a little bit more of a level head than we would put in that exact situation, and he delivers some great dry humor. The writers of this movie must have done another pass on the script when McGregor was cast. The word Jedi being thrown around throughout the movie was probably part of the original script, but there are many more references and nods made to McGregor's part of the Star Wars universe. Those cannot all be by accident. While this movie is first and foremost a comedy, it does have something to say. Something that seems more and more important as time goes on. Luckily, this movie was made in the time when people actually cared to write good movies, and story came before message. So you can enjoy watching this and think a bit without being beaten over the head with some hand-fisted thought on the writer's part with no thought of a quality movie. The characters are on a full-on mission of self-discovery through the concepts of belief. I have made a bunch of references and made light of the fact that these characters have this undeserved self-worth, but that's not entirely fair. People should have some self-esteem and self-belief. This instance of thinly proven psychic powers, to be generous, may not be the right place for it, but it's a great way to dive into these characters. They are delusional by most people's standards, but they're also charming, well-meaning, and come off as the heroes of the story. The audience is clearly supposed to believe the New Earth Army was out of their minds, but their principles and naivety is endearing and makes you think, at least for a second, that the psychic powers for non-violent conflict resolution may be a good thing if you could pull it off. All of this stacks on top of the message that I find to be the most important in the recent rewatch, and that is them exploring and poking fun at the military-industrial complex. Alright, I've set the stage, now it's time to make my case. The Men Who Stare at Goats isn't the next Citizen Kane. I'd say it's not an Academy Award winner, but that's not exactly a mark of quality at this point, if it ever even was. That is, once again, a tangent for another time. What it is a fun movie that is completely aware of what it is and how absurd the story it's telling is. It gives us some legit laughs while also hitting the viewer with an unexpected poignancy at times. It's stupid on its surface, but has some intelligent things to say, and is surprisingly uplifting since these stacked up stories take place in two wars. I understand selling people on this movie after years of it being bad-mouthed is an uphill battle. I also understand that this isn't the kind of movie everyone's gonna love. If you aren't into strange chaos and adults being silly, I can't even think of another word that's more appropriate, it probably won't work for you. Hopefully, if that's the case, you can at least agree that it doesn't deserve the beating it's taken by moviegoers over the last decade and a half. For anyone who can put their preconceptions aside and fall into the bizarre charm of the movie, you're in for a treat. Check out this playlist next for more retrospective reviews from So Wizard Podcast.
We had fun. Share, like, subscribe, comment down below.
Fucking, I'm out of here, this bitch.